Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Let's kick this video off with a wild story of exploitative bosses, unsanitary kitchens, late-night solo shifts, and a teenager's secret revenge fest that turned every closing shift into a personal buffet. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. Left alone to close the restaurant at 16, I took my payment in snacks and sodas. When I was a teenager, I worked as a dishwasher every Thursday for 6 months. This restaurant was disgusting. We, the dishwashers, had to use the same towels multiple days in a row because there were no clean ones, which is extremely unsanitary in a kitchen. The chefs and waiters absolutely abused their power and asked me to do so much extra work as if I didn't have a mountain of dirty dishes, glasses, and cutlery to clean. I could be extremely busy and suddenly have to run out and buy something for the chef. And when I came back, they were annoyed because they didn't have enough plates or whatever. I was also scolded for washing a cast iron pan with soap, even though nobody ever told me how to wash it properly, and I didn't know what it was. A few times I was called in to work on my day off because they had an event, and when I told them I had to leave at 10 p.m. because I had school in the morning, they just laughed and reminded me that I could leave when I was done, sometimes at 1 a.m. They exploited the fact that I didn't know how to say no. But the worst one was the fact that everyone always left before me in the evening because they were done and wanted to go home. I was a 16-year-old girl and was responsible for closing the restaurant up all alone, and I had to walk 300 meters down a creepy alleyway when it was dark at night to throw out the trash. I was all alone at night in the city center in a dark alleyway. My grandfather was picking me up one night, and he was so mad about it that he asked me to quit right away. My mom agreed, and I quit. But before I quit, I'd been getting my own petty revenge for a while. As I said, I was alone at night. Sometimes I was alone for a couple of hours while I finished the dishes, washed the floors, and cleaned up after people. I knew that they didn't keep count of certain things like how many sodas, ice creams, pancakes, etc. they kept in the freezer and fridge. So every time I was closing up alone, I had myself a little party. I was also starving because I never got any breaks to eat, so while I was washing up, I drank a couple of sodas, ate an ice cream, and maybe warmed a pancake or two in the oven for myself. I never touched anything important like the money. I just ate what I wanted and cleaned everything afterwards so they never knew. I even took a piece of cake or a sandwich with me home a few times. When I quit, the boss was mad because I was apparently the best dishwasher they had. The other washers were lazy and unreliable, while I was very reliable and fast because my mom taught me to work hard. I don't think I was anything special though, but I guess it's hard to keep good employees when you treat them like this. I also got a bad recommendation letter, but I will always remember how sweet the food tasted while I cleaned up everyone's crap alone. Who knew how important clean dishes were? Crazy. Glad you got your first crazy job experience out of the way so early on. You deserved every bite. I'm sure your employer was breaking several labor laws at the unfair treatment of a 16-year-old. And our second story. My neighbor is building a fence on my property. I've been living in this lovely single-family home neighborhood for about a year and a half now. I've made friends with many of my neighbors. Everyone's friendly and welcoming. Well, almost everyone. My next-door neighbor, Mike, is a bit of a mystery. He's retired, keeps to himself, and I've only had one conversation with him since I moved in. He's not exactly the friendliest guy, but I didn't think much of it. Not everyone needs to be best buddies. About a year ago, Mike decided he needed a new fence. He had the property lines marked, which is standard procedure, and even placed stakes with strings every 10 feet so the fence installers could see the boundaries clearly. No big deal. The fence went up, and it looked great. A few months ago, a hurricane swept through our area. Some large limbs fell on Mike's fence. A few days later, I came home from work and was shocked to see that Mike had built a new fence, this time clearly encroaching onto my property. I couldn't believe it. It was as if he was trying to claim part of my yard as his own. I knocked on his door, and when he answered, I said, "Hey, Mike, I noticed that the new section of your fence seems to be on my property. I think there might be a mistake with the property lines." He looked at me coolly and replied, "No mistake, the fence is exactly where it should be." I responded, "I'm pretty sure it's over the line. I've checked the property markers and it doesn't match up." He shrugged, "That's where the surveyors marked it." I told him, "I need you to remove the fence from my property or I'll have to consider legal action." He just brushed me off, saying, "Do what you have to do," and closed the door. Not wanting to escalate the situation unnecessarily, I pulled out my property deed, previous surveys, and any other relevant paperwork. I even hired a professional surveyor to remark the property lines. The survey confirmed that Mike's new fence was indeed encroaching on my property by 6.5 feet. I consulted a real estate attorney. The attorney advised me to send Mike a formal letter requesting the removal of the fence within a specified time frame, citing the survey results and the legal implications of encroachment. I sent the letter via certified mail, ensuring there was a record of receipt. A week went by with no response from Mike. The fence remained. My attorney then suggested we file a formal complaint with the local authorities. I submitted all the documentation to the city's zoning and planning department. They reviewed the case and agreed that Mike was in violation of property laws. A few days later, a city official visited both our properties. They attempted to speak with Mike, but he was uncooperative. The official then issued a notice of violation, ordering him to remove the fence encroachment within 30 days or face fines and potential legal action. Finally, faced with official enforcement, Mike began to dismantle the portion of fence that was on my property. One afternoon, I was working on it. I decided to approach him one last time. "Mike," I said, "I never wanted it to come to this. I hope we can move past this and be good neighbors." He paused for a moment and then replied, "I guess I misread the property lines. Let's just keep to ourselves from now on." I agreed. Fair enough. And our last story. I don't like people with disabilities, so you can't use the pool. When we moved into our condo, we were pleasantly surprised to find that the HOA wasn't the nightmare we'd heard about from other people. In fact, it was decent, reasonable rules, helpful board members, and no unnecessary drama. But then she came along, an old busybody with too much time on her hands and a burning desire to make life miserable for everyone. Let's call her Mrs. Crow. It started innocently enough. She got herself elected to the board, probably because no one else wanted the job. But from the moment she joined, everything in our HOA went downhill. Rules got stricter, complaints skyrocketed, and Mrs. Crow seemed to be watching everything. If a neighbor left their recycling bin out 5 minutes past pickup time, she was on it. If someone had a garden gnome out front that wasn't HOA approved, they'd get a notice in their mailbox. She thrived on petty power and controlling everyone else's business. For context, I'm disabled. I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and fibromyalgia, which makes walking painful, so I use a cane. One of the ways I manage my condition is by doing water therapy exercises. Our condo has a large pool, and I'd always found it to be the perfect place to do my hydrotherapy. I only ever took up a small corner of the pool, and no one had ever said anything negative about it. Most people were kind. Some even told me they admired my dedication to staying active despite my condition. But Mrs. Crow? Oh no, she saw me in the pool one afternoon toward the end of last summer and lost her mind. I was mid-stretch when I noticed her staring at me with this sour, judgmental look on her face, arms crossed like she was personally offended by my existence. Then she waddled over to the edge of the pool and barked, "You're taking up too much space. This pool isn't just for you, you know." I was stunned. "Ma'am, I'm only in one corner," I said, gesturing to the massive expanse of empty pool around me. "There's plenty of room for everyone." But she wasn't having it. "It's distracting," she snapped, waving her hand dismissively at me. "People don't want to watch you do whatever this is. You're detracting from everyone else's enjoyment." I didn't even know how to respond to that. Was my presence in a public pool that offensive to her? I didn't argue, I just left, shaken and angry, but determined not to let her get to me. Little did I know, that was just the beginning of her nonsense. Winter came and went, and I thought the issue had blown over. Mrs. Crow had made it clear that she didn't like me, but I wasn't going to let her ruin my use of the pool. At least that's what I thought. When the weather warmed up again, I grabbed my towel and swimsuit, excited to start my therapy routine. But when I tried to use my pool fob, it didn't work. I tried again, nothing. Confused, I called my husband to see if he'd had any issues. "Did you use the pool fob recently?" I asked. "Nope. Why?" he replied. "Wait, don't tell me they deactivated it." I called the HOA office, and after being transferred 3 times, I finally got an answer. "Your pool access has been restricted due to repeated violations of pool rules," the bored-sounding rep informed me. "What violations?" I demanded. "We've never broken any rules." She sighed like she was tired of dealing with me already. "You should have received a letter explaining the issue." And sure enough, a few hours later, we got an email with a form letter full of vague accusations, inappropriate use of the pool area, disruption of other residents' enjoyment, and failure to follow guidelines. It was all complete garbage. The real issue was crystal clear. Mrs. Crow didn't like me using the pool because I'm disabled, and she decided to wield her newfound HOA power to make sure I couldn't. My husband was furious. And honestly, so was I. "This is discrimination," he said. "We're not letting this slide." We sent a formal appeal to the HOA demanding an explanation and requesting to review any complaints filed against us. Unsurprisingly, they stalled for weeks. When we finally got a response, it was just more of the same vague nonsense. Mrs. Crow had clearly convinced the rest of the board to back her up, and no one wanted to stand up to her. We decided to escalate. I contacted the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA compliance hotline, and explained the situation. They directed me to file a formal complaint, and I also reached out to a disability rights lawyer for advice. Disabling your pool access without a legitimate reason could be considered a violation of the ADA, the lawyer told me, especially if it's clear that it's related to your disability. Armed with this information, we sent another letter to the HOA, this time CCing the lawyer and referencing the ADA. We demanded they reinstate our pool access immediately and warned them of potential legal consequences if they didn't. It took less than 48 hours for them to respond. Our pool fob was reactivated, and we received an overly formal apology email claiming there had been a misunderstanding. Sure, Jan. But the cherry on top? Mrs. Crow was mysteriously removed from the board a month later. Apparently, several other residents had filed complaints about her abusive behavior, and the pool incident with me was just the final straw. Rumor has it she's still fuming about being ousted. Now I'm back to doing my water therapy in peace, and Mrs. Crow keeps her sour face far away from me. If she doesn't like it, well, she can take it up with someone who cares. If I were Mrs. Crow, I'd be too embarrassed to show my face in that neighborhood ever again. Seriously, what kind of person sees someone quietly using a corner of a pool for therapy and decides, "You know what, I'm going to make this my personal mission to ruin their day"? Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.